So for the second installment of this AX8 Basics tutorial series, we're going to look at how we can add effects to the grid. At the moment I've got the preset that we made in tutorial number 1, which is the Friedman BE with a Recto 57 cab. Just to remind you, it sounds like this. I'm playing a PRS Custom 24 JB pickup in the bridge. Alright, so a pretty straight up kind of rock tone. What we want to do here is, if we have a look in AX8 Edit, we have a set of blocks before the amp to put effects into, and a set of blocks after the cabinet to put effects into. Now generally after the cab I would go with time-based effects, meaning reverbs and delays. Also if I was using a chorus or an enhanced block and I wanted a big stereo sound, I could put it after the cab block, and drives, wah pedals, EQs, filters, that kind of thing I would chuck in before the amp. So for me, I don't like to use a whole lot of effects, and the AX8 handles it very, very capably, but let's say, you know, for a kind of rock thing, I would probably want a gain boost up front. I would use a drive block for that. Maybe a phaser, basically so I can play Van Halen style stuff, and a wah pedal. And then after the cab, I might want a delay and a reverb. So let's go ahead and have a look at how we would do that in the AX8. Now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks set up before the amp and cab. If that's not enough, I can always just move the amp and cab over so I've got more space. Alright, let's go ahead. Let's add a drive block. If I right click, I can go to drive, and you can see that there's space for 2 drive blocks. Let's go with drive number 1. And it defaults to the rack, so I'm going to turn that off. We've got a huge selection here. You've got BB Pre, which is obviously based on the exotic BB preamp, a tone bender, a bit crusher, the black glass, which is a bass distortion, blues overdrive, which is the Marshall blues breaker and not the Boss blues driver, and then a whole bunch of other effects. Now, like in the real world, I would probably go for something like a tube screamer. So let's just select the T808OD. I'm going to use that. I will turn the drive all the way off, and I'll turn the level up to 10. And that is normally a really good gain boost. Let's have a listen to what that does with this dirty sound. So the tube screamer works really nicely there. It gives you that sort of tube screamer mid-hump, which is really, really nice. If that's not enough drive, like if you're playing a Strat or something like that, you can adjust the drive control, or you can adjust the level. Basically, because I'm already using an amp with a little bit of gain, I like this trick of setting the level on 10, using the tone to sort of dial in that real mid-rangey kind of boost, and then leaving the drive off. But you can crank the drive up if you want way more saturation. And as always, I would encourage you to experiment with different drive blocks. Let's add a phaser block now. I'm going to add this before the drive. That's sort of the Eddie Van Halen way to do it. So what we can do is we can go in here, we can have a look, and we scroll down, we've got phaser. And then what you've got, very similar to the drive block, if you select effect type, you've got a bunch of different effect types. Namely, what do we got? A barber pole phaser, a block 90, which would be like the MXR Phase 90, a Univibe, which is really handy. We've got digital mono, digital stereo. Digital stereo is really handy if you're putting it after the cab block. We'll have a listen to what that sounds like a little later. Script 45, script 90, and stereo 8 stage. Let's just use a script 90, turn the rate down a little bit, and it's instant EVH. So I'm really happy with that. We can also add a wah block in there as well. And one thing that you'll notice with the wah block is that if you turn it on, it's going to be a fixed wah. So we're not going to engage the wah block right now. I will have a little supplemental where I show you how to set up a wah block either as an auto wah or with an external pedal, where that one's coming up in another AX8 Basics tutorial. So for now, we're going to leave the wah block there. We're not going to use it. We've got the phaser and the drive. Let's go ahead and add a delay. Now, you can either add delay before the amp, which I guess is sort of the 60s or 70s way to do it. The only downside to that is, with the gain saging, if you have multiple repeats, let's have a listen, because what's going to happen is the initial repeat will be really loud and, have an amount of gain, but then the repeats after that are going to be lower in volume and they're going to clean up if they're in front of the amp. So let's select a delay block. I'm going to go with the tape delay style, again going for this sort of brown sound EVH thing. Why not? Not claiming that this is going to sound anywhere near as good as that either, but let's select the mono tape and I'll set it to 320 milliseconds. I really like it around there. So let's have a listen to what happens when I turn the delay block on. So it acts like a sort of classic tape echo. Let's have a listen to the same thing after the cabinet block. So it's a far more subtle effect, and what's happening there, I personally prefer this sound, but it is taking your distorted guitar signal and then decreasing the volume of that distorted signal, rather than taking your clean signal, chucking it in front of the amp, and the decreasing volume being interpreted as lowering the gain. So again, that difference after the amp, before the amp. So I'm going to stick that after the amp. I will turn the mix up a little bit. You can see there's so many controls here, but basically we've got the time, that's what we're going to stick with. You can adjust the feedback here and the mix. So stick to those three controls, time, feedback, and mix, and you'll be able to dial in a pretty nifty delay sound. Mix around 25% works for me. Yeah, that's nice. When I kick the tube screamer on, I've got a great lead sound now. Right, so one last block that I'll add. Often if you're playing direct, the tone is really dry and in your face. Again, because this is emulating the sound of a close mic'd guitar cabinet, let's add a reverb block, and we can add a little bit of a sort of roomy sound with this. If you select the effect type of Recording Studio C, I find this is really handy. Turn the mix down to about 8%, and instantly you get a little bit more of a sort of airy room kind of sound. I think that sounds pretty good. Go really easy on the mix with the reverb, and I don't really play around with too many of the parameters with the reverb. I just like to use the effect type until I find a reverb that I like. Another favorite of mine is the London plate. It sounds like this. And like I said earlier, you can just select the effect type, and there's so many great sounding reverbs in here. It's really easy to dial them in. Just go easy on the mix. Alrighty, so what we've got now is a wah. We're going to come back to the wah, remember? A phaser, a drive, a delay, and a reverb. So on the physical unit, how would we go about setting these up so I can actually turn them on and off? In AX8 Edit, we're going to go to Foot Switches, and then we can right-click any foot switch we like and assign an effect type to it. So for example, I might want to have my drive block right here, a phaser, so I've right-clicked, select the phaser, right-click, select the delay. Oh, I want to select the delay, not the drive. And then right-click and select the reverb. Right, so what you can do now is, if you look at your AX8, you can turn the effects on and off with the individual foot switches, which is great. If you do it with AX8 Edit, don't be alarmed. You hit it and you get this communication pause, click to resume. Basically, all that's saying is, hey, click the screen, and you can now see that I've turned the drive block on. It takes a little while to communicate. So don't freak out if you are hitting the physical switches and AX8 Edit is telling you there's a timeout. You just have to click the screen and you're all good. So what I can do now is, if we look away from the screen, I've got the unit here. I can turn my individual effects on and off if I've got it on the floor, which is really easy. And this is basically performance ready now. So I'll do drive, and then so what I'll do is I'll do a dry sound, and then I'll turn the individual effects on and off in order. Let's have a listen to that. is sounding pretty happening. You should be able to take that to a gig, a rehearsal, or a session, and you've got yourself a great rock rig. One thing you will have noticed though is that when I turn that drive block on, I get quite a bit of noise. So to fix that, the final thing we'll talk about today is the input gate. If you click on the input gate, it comes up with a bunch of parameters here. What I like to do in each preset is I right click the input gate and I go to reset current effect type. And that basically resets the gate. So what we'll do is select the intelligent gate. You can see the threshold set to -80. We're going to play around with that. Basically, I don't play around with the advanced settings on the gate at all. I just set it to intelligent and I change the threshold. So what I do is have my guitar wide open. I'll turn the drive block on. You can hear there's a very slight amount of sort of hiss after it. That's normally pretty fine. I normally set it to -60 just to make it really tight. And you can hear with that one, there's none of that hiss afterwards. You might want to have the gate a little bit looser or even tighter than this. It's totally up to personal preference, but just start by using the threshold control. And that really is a godsend live. So there we go. What we've done is we have added a bunch of effects to our basic preset, and we've tweaked the gate, and we've got a gig-ready preset for the AX8. What we're going to talk about in the next lesson is scenes, so stick around for that one, and if you enjoyed this, please hit the subscribe button.